Has anybody seen the picture that goes around on the internet from an old issue of Doctor Who magazine where a 6-year-old Peter Capaldi writes in and says how big of a fan of the show he is and wonders if there's any way he can help with the show at all? Yeah, that really happened. Yeah. So don't tell me dreams don't come true.
Wow. I knew he was a huge fan, but I didn't know it was that far back. Wow.
Oh yeah. He remembers watching the first episode.
Wow. That's cool.
Or at least he thinks he does, yeah. So was he 5'5"?
Or so, yeah. Must have been.
Assuming, and you know how we assume, IFBB is like 158, April 58,
Wouldn't doubt it.
so it clears in.
November 22nd, 1963. Sorry, 23rd, 1963. The day after Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah, I don't think I remember Kennedy's assassination.
You have a question back this direction? Get the horns.
Well, I'm just wondering, last year, I don't know if it was BBC or PBS, who did that special, it wasn't really a documentary, it was made for TV that showed about the origins of...
That was BBC, An Adventure in Time and Space,
Adventure in
which is
Yes.
which is how David Bradley got basically cast to replace William
It
Hartnell.
was
Here.
spectacular.
It is.
Oh, I loved it.
It's absolutely
And I
wonderful. I have a
no
friend.
idea the history.
I have a friend who lives in this area down here who was not a Doctor Who fan, and the girl he was dating at the time was, and that was like one of the very first things that he saw,
Right.
and that made him a Doctor Who fan. He just
And
got
the
that documentary.
wave of the popularity,
Yeah.
you know. I remember, you know, also that particular, it was like a mini-series, I guess it went on for a week or so.
That's
When the female executive was trying to come up with, you know, how to make the Daleks scary, and they got the plungers on there. Brilliant, it was spectacular.
We're pretty close.
Yeah, yes,
I love
we
that.
have
Yeah.
officially
We
started.
We can go ahead and do this.
We can play the rest of this afterwards. We'll just leave it on that screen. How appropriate.
It almost looks like my Facebook.
Peter
profile.
Capaldi.
Darn near.
Yes.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Farewell Peter Capaldi panel. And my name is Chris Burnham. I am the head of the Tulsa Doctor Who Viewing Society up in Tulsa. We've been a group that's been in existence since 1999, created by a man named Bruce Rich, who just recently passed away, but I am very grateful for him to have created the opportunity for me to meet as many fans as I have, around the state, and to do these type of panels. We have meetings twice a month, various libraries up in Tulsa. And so if you're from the Tulsa area, please search on Facebook for Tulsa Doctor Who Viewing Society. You have to look for the whole thing. We'll call ourselves the TDWVS to shorten it down, but you have to look for the whole name on Facebook to get it out there. If you're local, which I assume most of you are, there's a great group here called Serendipity, which I've had the opportunity to go to one of their meetings, only one, but one of their meetings, and how long have you been in existence? Because I think you predated us. 88, yeah, I knew you predated us.
They started the same year I got married.
Okay. So they meet once a month at a place out near Midwest City, a diner out there. Spencer. Oh, Spencer. Okay. And they're a great group as well locally. They also help very much with a convention called SoonerCon, which happens here every June, and which I'm very thankful to have around, because those type of conventions, those local fan-made conventions, don't get to exist very much. Okay, so that's me, and I will do a lot of talking here, but I'll try not to dominate it. Tuck, go ahead.
My name is Tuck Davian. I'm usually in a 10th Doctor costume for these kind of things, but I didn't bring that up here. I'm Tulsa's 10, down in Tulsa, and I do also all kinds of conventions around the tri-state area as the 10th Doctor. I usually do a pretty good voice, like bingle bongle dingle dangle, yickety-doo, yickety-daw, ping pong, lippy-toppy too-tom. And that's my thing. But I also do wrestling announcing, so he and I travel a great deal around the Sooner State here, and we get to do a lot of cool things. I go to the meetings at the Viewing Society sometimes, not as often as I would like, but I make it whenever I can. And I was very fortunate to be asked to be on this panel today, so I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
I'm Brian Copeland. I basically do audio and video production, and I do voice recording work, and I am a huge Doctor fan from way back. I love Doctor Who, so that's me.
And I would like to point out a couple of other members who are technically on this panel, although they're taking the passive position at this point. The person who actually put this panel together is Jay North, who's sitting out there. He's feeling a bit under the weather, so he
You're
will
so
be
much better at talking than I am. So.
sitting up there. And then over here is Brooks Williamson, who's my best friend. He's responsible for getting me into Doctor Who because we would ride the school bus together, and he would talk with another friend of ours about this show that I'd never seen. And I got really tired of hearing them talk about it and wondering what was going on, so I finally decided to watch. And then it just kind of took off from there. I've been a fan since 1980. When did I meet you, Brooks? 85? 1985. Watching on PBS locally here. So, I guess we all understand what's happening at the end of this year, right? Yeah. And I guess really the best way to start, kind of, and I'm gonna start down with you because I have a feeling that your two opinions are going to be, or stories are going to be a little different than mine. Start about your feelings about Capaldi when he took the role, what your impressions of the Doctor were, of his Doctor were, what you think perhaps his lasting legacy for the role will be. I'm going to start with you, Brian.
All right. I'm a huge horror movie fan. So for me, my first exposure to Capaldi was Lair of the White Worm. Do you know if it? Nobody. Way back there. One person reacted. Yeah, great horror flick. Has Capaldi in a proper kilt playing bagpipes. So when I found out that he was going to be in Doctor Who, I was super excited. And I didn't even know how big of a fan he was at that point in time. I kind of found that out later and even more today, quite frankly. So, yeah. You know, the first season seemed a little rocky, but God, they blew it out of the park by the end. I'm super happy. So that's my take on Capaldi.
When I heard about it, I was ready. I mean, I saw who it was, and I was like, yes, all right, cool, we've got an older guy. It's not going to be a boyfriend Doctor. We're going to hopefully part from this will they, won't they type of romantic thing that I really feel like Tennant and Billy did best. And when I heard it was Peter, I said, yes, I'm ready for this. I'd seen a lot of his other stuff where, you know, he has no filter, let's just put it that way. And I said, oh man, this guy's going to bring something else to it that I've been looking for. Something kind of along the lines of, because Eccleston wasn't that guy. He was more serious and more, he'd get a joke in here or there, but he was mostly not looking to start a relationship, that kind of thing. And then he had that, I'm not a hugger. I'm like, yes. I'm looking very forward to this guy. And I think you're right that by the end of that season, I was all the way in, but I was never fully out. I didn't follow the usual, no, I can't stand this guy. Oh, well, I guess maybe he's okay. Oh, how could they ever replace him? Like, I never did that. I was feet first all the way.
I've made no secret amongst my friends and on these panels before when asked about Capaldi that upon his casting, I was excited, much like Tuck, and really for the very much the same reasons as Tuck. I love David Tennant, I love Matt Smith, but I did get tired after a while of the romantic boyfriend-girlfriend relationship aspect of things. We told that story, okay? We don't need to tell it over 7 or 8 seasons worth of time. So give me an older Doctor, which I thought was great because I was a classic fan, and Tuck is not around as a classic fan. But
I don't know if you could classify me as not a classic fan.
Sorry, but you didn't grow, I should
No,
say
you're right.
you didn't grow up watching classic Who like I did, and I assume like you did as well. Okay, so his basic exposure is younger-ish Doctors, and this is different for him. I was watching this and going, yes, now we're getting something like the old series tended to have, an older, wiser, mentor-y type person visually that's going to do this. And then his first season, I hated him. I absolutely
That's typically the
hated
model.
him. And it wasn't because, oh, well, how could you possibly replace my previous Doctor, because that was my Doctor. I was used to that. I've gone through this so many times. It's not that. It's the fact that he was mean.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he was mean. And I don't understand directors and producers, because it's not the first time this has happened, but I don't understand directors and producers who choose to make a character who has professed repeatedly that he loves humanity, that he loves the planet Earth, he's here to protect and save and do all the right things. Why do you have someone like that be so demonstrably arrogant and mean and condescending to the people that he professes to be his favorite people? It didn't jive with me when Colin Baker did it as the Sixth Doctor, and it doesn't jive with me now with Peter. So I was really worried at the end of the first season when we had not progressed out of this, when this wasn't just post-traumatic regeneration stuff, and we're still doing it. And here and there were moments where I was like, okay, there's the doctor. There's the doctor right there. He said some good stuff right there, and can we get that? No, he's gone away. And I didn't like that. And I think, and I don't know because I haven't done the work, the research on it, but I think that perhaps there was a certain amount of feedback, and I actually think perhaps there was some feedback from Capaldi as well, about, hey, this isn't who I'm supposed to be. Because there's a very drastic change of tone for the Doctor himself between season 1 and his first and second season. And what you get in seasons 2 and 3 is much, much better. And I will truly be upset to see him go. Whereas if you'd asked me this first season, I'd be like, I can't wait to get rid of him. I just get him off my screen. But yeah, now I'll be very upset when we get to this Christmas special, and because the fan, the kid who grew up and got to live his dream is what's on that screen now, and that was much more covered up in that first season to me. Yeah.
I mean, he has done the whole, like, yeah, she's my carer, she cares so I don't have to.
Yeah,
That's recent.
I know, and again, that just
I
doesn't
felt it was like
jive.
the first Doctor. I really did. I felt he was the first Doctor was just, dismiss you humans.
Yep.
You're fools, get off my ship, quit bothering me. And I felt like Peter Capaldi brought that back in the first season. But you're right, I feel like Peter Capaldi himself probably had something to do with that change, because you see more of the guitar later and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I love
Yes.
And yeah, he changed that character and made it more friendly, which is a good thing in the long run.
And it's funny because you bring up Hartnell and you bring up his dismissiveness and being almost, he really is an anti-hero. The first 2 or 3 stories of the original series, he's very much an anti-hero. It's understandable, to me, it's understandable for him to be that way because he hasn't been necessarily around humans on a regular basis. It's been him and Susan traveling alone in various places, and he hasn't been forced to be amongst the human experience. And I think that exposure to Ian and Barbara and their relationship with Susan and their relationship with him softens him. And so again, the going backwards in my mind is a big step backwards when you try to make the Doctor harsh and again like that. It just doesn't work for me. But that's me. And I know other people have other opinions on that. So, speaking of moments, since I said there in the course of that there were moments that kind of the Doctor, in that first season especially, the Doctor springs up to me and goes this. What do you think, with so many of the Doctors, there are key moments of it. There's Matt Smith at Stonehenge, Hello Stonehenge, the big speech there, and then there's David Tennant's I Don't Want to Go moment. What do you think is the moment or a moment that's really just kind of sums up Capaldi's Doctor that we've seen or jumps out?
I can think about 2 or 3 of those.
Give us examples, sure.
Let's see. There was the one that he went on about how humans had to reach out and save people. Which one was that? They were on the spaceship with the spacesuits.
Okay.
Was that Kill the
We
Moon?
define ourselves by saving people and going towards this distress being, and if we don't save people, we're not good people, basically.
That sounds like oxygen, not.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
correct. Exactly. And
That episode.
that was one defining moment that I can remember. Maybe one of those speeches.
One of his that I really liked was the Mummy on the Orient Express, when he said, "You've got to set this thing on me so that I can figure this out, instead of letting everybody else die, so that he could try and put it together." And then when he finally gets the mummy's right up next to him, and he goes, "You're relieved, you're done." And the guy's like, phew. And that was a big one for me, where he let the guy go.
That story is the one in the first season that I said, okay, there's almost the doctor right there. That story is the closest that you got to really feeling like what I felt the doctor should be like in that first season. For me, it will forever be the choice, the button choice in the Zygon Invasion, Zygon Inversion. The big speech that he gives there is just so classic of being a big doctor moment, and of attempting to make humanity understand how stupid they're being without being, overly harsh and pounding about it. He just says, "I'll leave this up to you. You can make this choice here, but whatever choice you make, you can understand the consequences of it." And that right there, and I feel like that speech, I know it on the convention circuit that's become kind of popular for past doctors to be given these big speeches like the Stonehenge speech, for them to do, because we all kind of look, we know this is the same character, but we all in our minds think, well, man, how would Paul McGann play this moment, or how would Tom Baker play this moment? And then there have been moments where they've been given these speeches when they've been in panels for them to read, so we can hear a fifth doctor doing the Stonehenge speech, or we can hear something like that. That speech in the Zygon Invasion version is one that I think should be given out to past doctors so that they can do that. I'd like to hear them give that particular speech.
I got something that I actually shared on Facebook last year that popped up in my feed, and I just so happened to be looking at it, and it's something that Peter had said. He said, "The doctor is such a familiar character. Do kids really think you're actually him? It's lovely. I'm still Peter, but when I walk into a room, I get all the smiles the doctor would get. The other day I had a little girl come up to me and throw her arms around my neck crying, 'Doctor Who, Doctor Who.' It's very easy to make people happy when they're automatically glad to see you, and you just have to be nice to them in return, which is a pretty good rule for life. Just show up and don't be horrible, and you'd be surprised how much people like it."
See, this is why I think that he was so incredibly important to this change that must have happened, because repeatedly you hear him say, and even in some of the clips that are used in the later seasons, you hear the doctor say, "Just be kind." First season, he's not kind. He is not a kind person. He's a mean person. And I think, again, that Capaldi said this is not true to what I feel the doctor should be. That type of experience, I remember reading that Tom Baker would experience the same thing. That children, he said that parents could turn their children loose when he was around. They never had to worry about him doing anything wrong, and that this role was the only role he could think of where children could just automatically run up to you, and you were like the safe, as far as like a not Disney or kiddish type show. This was the one role that the children could be trusted to go up to you, and parents never had to worry. And he was always very cognizant of making sure that he was never seen smoking, because Tom did smoke, and drinking, because he drank quite a bit, if you know Tom. In public where children would potentially be around. And that he could literally, and did, apparently, literally go into strangers' homes. Like he just turned up on their doorstep and knocked on their door. And when they opened, here's the doctor, out of costume, but here's the doctor, and would be welcomed into people's homes of complete strangers that he never met, simply because of who he was. And I'm pretty sure that any of the doctors, obviously, but especially Peter, could pull that off as well.
The doctor he has that quality about him. I know you and I did a panel, I think it was in this exact same room, for a con that we will not name here, so as not to give them any publicity, but it was called Confessions of a Whovian. And one of the things that I had said is, while I was dressed up as Tennant, I more than one time had a child who was missing their parents run up to me because they knew who I was. And they had seen him on TV, and I was the only person in this sea of people that they trusted. Can you take me back home? And you have to go boom and put the voice on and do the thing and pull out the sonic and okay, we'll find them, let's go. And they immediately trust you because they've seen you so often in their own homes.
You can take them.
It's just you're always, even when you're not really him and you're in that costume, to them it's still you're a guest in their homes every week when they watch the show, and that's how they know you.
And there's going to be violence, but he's going to take care of it the way that he takes care of it, which is his unique method, as opposed to typical Starfleet style.
That was one of the points of Listen, though, wasn't it? That fear is a superpower,
yeah.
And it gives you all this extra, stuff that you normally wouldn't be able to do unless you were scared for your life. you know, you can run faster, jump higher, you know, you can breathe deeper because, you know, you've got more air in your lungs. So, I mean, it was, you were saying children like to be scared, and then if you have a child who's watching this show and you have the doctor giving this speech like, hey, don't be afraid to feel fear, this will make you be able to do a lot more than you normally would because you're fighting for your life or whatever.
If I was traumatized by cliffhangers as a child, I'm screwed.
Back there?
So I was saying, Mr. Burnham, you know, of course, we're talking about Scooby-Doo.
Sure.
Johnny
Yes.
Quest,
Yes.
Johnny Quest,
Yeah.
Tom and Jerry.
Scooby-Doo
Tunes.
was awesome because
All
it taught you that every single villain in
Yeah.
the world, a monster in the world, is some crazy old guy with a rubber mask.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
and when
comfort.
someone's saying, oh my gosh, it's scary for children, it's like, are you watching
Same
cartoons on Saturday morning anymore?
Scrappy-Doo is not really a kid or a puppy. He's actually a miniature Doberman who's actually 30. That shocked me when I read the creator said, oh no, Scrappy's actually, he's a miniature Doberman. He's Scooby's cousin, but he's not a puppy like they said. He's a puppy. He pretended to be a puppy. And it's like,
It's the most annoying 30-year-old ever.
So,
Well, not just the character, but the episodes were always, you know, somebody trying to steal someone's property by pretending to be a ghost, and, you know, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids, you know, and so, but that's not bad, but Doctor Who is, you know, that just doesn't make sense to me.
it's a live action and
it could be to a certain extent.
say it's not real, but if you're seeing real people, you might forget that it's not something real, but.
You also have to remember that the British have an interesting little hang-up when it comes to visual portrayals of violence. They don't have the sexual hang-up that Americans do. You can watch, Europeans in general don't have the sexual hang-up that Americans do. You can watch television in Europe, this is broadcast, not pay services, and after like 9 o'clock, it's not uncommon to see like topless women on various dated shows. And it's nothing to think about. You can buy the newspapers, and there's what's called a page 3 girl, which is some topless model that's there. But if you get violent, if you show blood, then that's a problem, because they will rate stuff in the old rating systems, again in the 60s and 70s. They would rate like the Hammer movies, the Hammer, Dracula, and Frankenstein. A lot of those were rated X because of the violence content, rather than anything that we would traditionally think of an X rating going for. That's a social difference between the British and us as far as what they feel is inappropriate. And that was during the Deadly Assassin era. Philip Hinchcliffe is drawing a lot of connections off of those Hammer films and is trying to up some of the realistic violence aspects of Doctor Who. And that's what brought Mary Whitehouse in and brought the criticism here. For modern Who, I can't think of a situation where it seems like they've ramped up anything in terms of violence, because it's not an overly violent show, truly. I mean, if you look at Doctor Who compared to a lot of traditional traditional American dramas of this nature, the violence quotient, I think, is much lower than you would have on anything else.
I've known kids that are more scared of the old black and white ones than they are of the modern stuff,
Yeah.
because
Claymation.
they've grown accustomed to the CG stuff nowadays, and they see it on a regular basis. You show them one of those old black and white ones with a fake looking spider chasing people, it's incredible.
Okay, so we got about 15 or so minutes left, and I think we've done like a lot of talking up in here. So I, at this point, would love to have some questions to answer from you guys, as far as things that and we'll, it's Capaldi, but we'll answer about anything. Go ahead.
Okay, what do you guys all think about the censorship of Doctor Who and its brief Disney XD run?
I haven't seen any of that, so I can't tell you.
Not aware. I knew they ran the K9 series on that show, on that channel, but I wasn't aware that they ever actually showed Doctor Who itself.
Yeah, they showed the David Tennant episodes and they censored the crud out of
Wow.
especially the one with the Satan pit.
Oh, sure. I
Okay, I can understand that. Yeah, I can see Disney being a little uncomfortable with some of the visual imagery that was in there. Disney has its standards. They're strange standards from some perspectives, but they have their standards. But I would actually have to watch an episode that they've hacked and chopped in order to see what they've taken out, in order to truly answer your question, because I don't know. I do know, like I said, that they ran the K9 series and gave it probably its biggest spread publicity over here, and that series is very kid-centric and will blend in very nicely with a lot of their programming.
Is that the new?
Yeah, the Australian K9 series.
Yeah. I never got into that one.
It takes a certain endurance.
Yeah.
I have the whole series and I screened it all, and yeah, there were some
Sonic
audio.
lipstick in it?
No, that's actually Mainstream Doctor. No, they remodeled K9 and
Something
then
Sonic, right?
and then they gave him to a family with a scientist who was agoraphobic, and I don't know, it has some good ideas. I think there were some solid ideas behind it, but it was just made very much for children, and so it came off as kidified. And yeah, there's people talking about
You're
making out
next.
a movie. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Couple things. David
Yeah.
Tennant is the new voice of Scrooge McDuck.
Mhm.
Yes.
I just found out that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kinda cool.
I had to go rewatch it again. What's your take on Rick and Morty?
There you go. There you go. It's your show.
I love Rick and Morty, to be honest with you. I keep trying to get him to watch it. He's only got a few, like 2 episodes
I watched 2 episodes.
under its belt. Rick and Morty, to me, has always been a show where I think the creators get drunk every single time that they go to write an episode, and they say, now, we're going to get canceled after this season, the first season. So, we're going to do whatever we think we can get away with, even if we don't think we can get away with it, just to see what the network will and won't let us do. So we're going to throw this ridiculous idea out there, we're going to throw that ridiculous idea out there, and see what happens. And surprisingly enough, the network was just like, all right, go ahead and do it. And they're just like, all right, give me another shot, let's do this. And then they would write more episodes. So that's really where I feel like the show started. And then when you hear, and I think it's that way, because when you hear the little tile they put at the end of the show, did you get any of that? You know, where, you know, because I'm pretty sure, and then you watch the first Interdimensional Cable episode and the guys can't make it through their lines because they're laughing. So you know they've got to have had like 3 shots before they did this. Insofar as tying it around to Doctor Who, I don't really feel like Rick and the Doctor would get along. I think that they're ostensibly on 2 different ends of the spectrum when it comes to saving the world or saving the Earth or what it even is that they're trying to do that day.
Now, let me cut you off on that. Given the wide range of personalities that we've seen through 12, 13 Doctors, are you saying that it wouldn't get along with any of them?
No, I think some of them would get along.
Yeah.
Maybe the first Doctor might get along with Rick,
Okay.
but I mean, when I say wouldn't get along, I'm talking from Eccleston up to now. I don't. Maybe Rick and the first season of Peter Capaldi,
Okay.
they might have gotten along there,
When he
but
first got on.
right. So I mean, and I've seen the pop culture mashup, what I call gimmick shirts that they're selling on Facebook. Come on,
Yes,
buy
I've
this.
seen that.
Well, I feel like they take 2 dice and they just roll them, and each side has a pop culture reference on it. They're like, we're gonna mash those 2 up, make some money. Let's do this.
Speaking of,
It's worked for me.
DuckTales, Rick and Morty.
All right. Yes, Jay. Well, you go.
Wow.
Give us a question, Jay.
Yes, what are your guys' favorite Capaldi episodes? Mine are the ones with the Zygons and one with the castle, whatever that was called.
Heaven Sent and Hellbent, or Heaven Sent is the Castle one episode specifically. Those are both great episodes. I love both of those. Zygon Invasion and Zygon Invasion. If you pushed me up against the wall and said, pick one story and only one that that could survive for Doctor Who, for 12th Doctor, we're going to wipe literally everything else, I'd pick the Zygon Inversion story. I like The Mummy on the Orient Express first season because it's the closest I think that he gets to being what I think the Doctor should be. This last season, man, all of those stories were tremendous. I'd be really hard pressed to pull one out and say this was my favorite one. To be fair, I've only watched them like twice each, so I'm not as overly familiar, if you will, as I am with the others.
I really liked Kill the Moon.
See, that's one of those episodes that I've read that there's a lot of hatred for the Back to the Future 3 scenario, or a Bill and Ted scenario where she knows what's coming, she remembers what he did to her, and she built something in to allow her to go ahead and regenerate, even though he says that she can't. based on that pre-knowledge that she has. I think that's how it's going to work. We won't see her, we'll see the replacement, but the master will live on. That's my take on it. Okay, yeah, question.
There's the thing where they said that they lost the 2 copies of the old Doctor Who that they only have audio for, and they know it went to like Philippines, and they know for sure it came to Oklahoma, might have gone up to Kansas, and there's like the reward BBC puts out for those.
Okay.
You can get those extra copies. You know if anybody's actually looked in like the PBS archives at Hero, Kansas to see if they still have them.
Okay, this is actually the first that I heard that those stories ever got to Oklahoma, because the distribution on a lot of those lost episodes went to Canada, I know. But my understanding is that distribution-wise, Doctor Who did not come to America until 1976 or 77, 77 for sure, because I used to have very multi-generational VHS dubs of some of the Pertwee stories that were in color, and then for a while were only in black and white. I had the color copies of them from a northeastern PBS station. It's more than 2 stories, I can tell you that. And as far as them being lost and being, well, first to answer your question, has anybody searched the archives of the PBS here? To my knowledge, no, because like I said, this is the first I'd heard that they made it into here. There is a guy named, who is it, Ian, I can't think of his last name right now. He's the head of a group called the Doctor Who Restoration Group, and his work is what has allowed several of those stories, including the Enemy of the World and Web of Fear, to be recovered. And he is apparently in contact with a lot of places, but all those places are overseas. Many of them in Africa, because there's a pretty decent distribution of Doctor Who in Africa, apparently, and in Southeast Asia.
Didn't they find a second Doctor episode on like a railway in Zimbabwe or something like that?
I don't know about if it's a railway, but Zimbabwe sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, it was like a side room on a railroad.
Okay. So the search is still on, but I can tell you that one of the problems with, especially in Africa and in African countries and in other Southeast Asian countries, is that the local governments are very unstable and in some instances very hostile towards outside countries coming in and doing anything. And some of the traces of attempts to track down lost episodes have been intentionally impeded by the local government. They don't want outsiders coming in, presumably to find not media-related things, but other types of bigger the UN needs to intervene here now situations going on. Will we recover everything? Doubtful. There are certain episodes that were never syndicated. Part of the Dalek Master Plan, an episode called The Feast of Stephen, which was a Christmas episode, was never syndicated anywhere. So we will probably never have that in visual form. But every single episode, thanks to the work of many fans, does exist in audio. Every single episode was recorded. Fans used to take old reel-to-reel setups and find ways to plug them into their TVs so they could record episodes straight out, no background hissing and extraneous noises. So every single episode does exist in audio form, but I don't think we'll ever get all of them back visual form, sadly. Yeah.
I just have to know in depth about, in the first season you said y'all didn't really care for this quality.
I didn't, yes.
I did.
He did.
I understand impact, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Where he came from, where he was trying to find out who he was again, why the face, and then later on in the series you find out why. But can I have that on why he didn't?
Why I didn't like him?
Other than the fact that he was me.
Like, well, that's pretty much the main reasoning for it. I dislike when directors and producers choose to try and take Doctor Who, in their minds, I know that they've stated, we're going to take Doctor Who back to its roots, to Hartnell. Because Hartnell was a touchy old guy and was grumpy, and we like that about him. And they forget I think that Hartnell softened quickly because of his interaction with other peoples. And so they just focus on the meanness and the gruffness, and they seem to think that this will sell because it's different. We don't have the Doctor as a bosh action hero. We don't have him as, oh, I love you so much, my companion person. We want something different, so what can our brains come up with? Oh, I know, we'll make the Doctor mean. And we'll make him gruff, and we'll make him angry.
See, I took it as he was like that because he lost Amy and then he lost Clara, what, 2 or 3 times before he died again?
But he's had, those companions are still alive. Well, I mean, Amy. But if that were the case, to me, if that were the case, then every single time the Doctor regenerated, he would be gruff, angry guy because he's seen companions literally die. Andrew died. Katarina died. His personality changes absolutely. He goes through the trauma. I mean, the 10th Doctor said, every time I regenerate, it's like I die. And he doesn't want to do it. And I get that. I get that aspect. But he comes through, and most of the time, 90% of the time, he comes through without going through a period of humanity is pudding heads, and people are stupid, and you all are, I don't care about any of you. He doesn't do that. 6th Doctor did, 12th Doctor did. I think it's in every 6th Doctor thing. So we'll see if it's true when we get up to the 18th. And
I
see
even
that.
remember when Tennant was on, and had just first taken up that role. I think it was Tooth and Claw. He was like, what, am I just rude now? And there's a thing online, it's like, rude and not ginger. And I'm like, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, he's still not ginger.
No, still not.
He's
Okay.
moving in a little bit, or she's moving.
Well, she's blonde, isn't she?
Yeah, she's not ginger.
She's not ginger. Amy was ginger.
Well, her last one, if she hasn't changed her.
That wasn't real ginger.
That was Spanish.
It was like great value ginger.
There you go.
It was more of a strawberry blonde, probably.
That's still red. That's close to red ginger. That's ginger adjacent.
We need a real ginger.
We need
I'm
Jamie or-
hoping the Master or Missy get it first, but that's just.
So Michelle Gomez isn't going to be doing movies or anything other than.
We might get some audio out of her with Big Finish if we're lucky.
That's true. They Big Finish now has licensed Tennant to do a lot of stuff, and so potentially maybe we can get her to do that. She did an episode of Gotham last season,
Yes.
which
she did.
was cool to see her,
Yeah.
playing something that was not, because that's all I've ever seen her as was Missy,
Yeah.
and then for her to turn up on Gotham was pretty cool.
I gotta catch up with Gotham.
Yeah.
But-
All the companions fall in love with the Doctor.
Well, recently, yes.
Well,
Well,
even
That's sorry. New series. That's not an old series thing.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
But then it's going to be time late,
See, and there we go. There's one of the things. Well, we know her companion. She's going to have 3
I
companions.
feel like she's already close there as it is. I mean, it's not so much the love, it's just he taught her everything, in the world.
I don't think I'm hoping we don't revisit the whole lovey-dovey aspect from the female perspective, because it's just the same story.
Yeah.
And we know she's got 3 companions. One, Bradley Walsh, older, who was apparently the leading contender when they still were going to make it a guy to be the Doctor. And then 2 younger people who I don't remember their names right now, and I don't know anything that they were on. Bradley Walsh was on Law and Order UK, and I watched him for 2 or 3 seasons on there. He was regular on that. But I don't recognize these other 2 from anything. They've done stuff with Chris Chibnall, and that's why they're on there, but I don't recognize them from anything. Yeah.
Have they said since the Time Lords gave him the extra regeneration?
Yes.
How many more regenerations are gonna be?
Specifically, they've not said, but the assumption.
He should
In
have
fact,
been
it was the
like,
one on the moon that he kind of goes, I could regenerate forever.
Yeah, but they haven't specifically said, but if you go to the 5 Doctors and they promise the Master the same thing, which is how they can justify giving it to the Doctor, and they just say a complete new life cycle, assumption of life
That's
cycle.
what Smith
but
said,
again,
a whole new regeneration
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah, but he also said that he could regenerate. What is it?
if he could.
He in you probably never saw it in the Sarah Jane adventure that Matt Smith was in. He's yelling at, I can't think of his name right now. It's in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and it's the.
Is it Sarah's son?
No, it's the other boy.
Okay.
It's the other boy. He's being annoying to the doctor. He's pestering with all these questions that he's heard from Sarah, all this stuff about the doctor. And now he gets to meet the doctor. He's just like full of questions. And one of them is Clyde, yes. And he asks the doctor, how many times can you regenerate? And the doctor comes up with like some huge number, like 503. And people were like, oh, it's been on the show, so it's canon. He can regenerate 503 times.
The doctor lies.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, well, that's rule number one.
Especially for Matt Smith.
The doctor lies.
All right, quickly, it's like 3:21, so yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you guys did a great job, so thank you.
Well, thank you much.
Thank you all for coming.